everybody. Welcome on in. Well, everyone should be able to type in the chat. Hi, Jamie. You too. You might need to, in the chat, you might need to change it from host and panelist to everyone if you want everyone to see your messages, by the way. Welcome on in, everyone. I'm just going to give it a minute or so before we get started. Is anyone tuning in for the very first time to a Femhouse workshop? Or are all of you returnees? Ah, you joined the drum session last time. Nice. I'm back. Good to see ya. Returning, nice. You're new. Welcome. Welcome on in. I think we're gonna go ahead and get started just because I am not gonna lie, I'm super exhausted and energy is precious. We're gonna try to conserve that as much as possible. But also hold on. Let me go ahead and can everyone hear me okay, by the way? What else do I need to do? Cool. Yes? Okay, perfect. Well, welcome on in, everyone. If you are new here, my name is Lauren. My artist name is Minnie Bear, and I am the chief education officer at Femhouse, which basically means that I teach all of the music production workshops, and then also I curate all of the curriculum and teach the whatchamacallit, the online courses that we have. So we usually have like 2 online courses a year. The next one should be coming up within the next few months. So, but yeah, that being said, very excited about today's workshop topic because we are going to be talking about shaping your sound, which is essentially talking about synthesis and sound design. Has anyone here actually joined any of the previous synthesis workshops? Also, I feel like I hear a weird sound right now. Let me see. You have not. Okay. Great. So today we're essentially going to be going through some like really fundamental synthesis concepts that hopefully will give you a better idea in terms of like how to create a sound from scratch. We have a very special guest today who I'll be introducing more so later on, Charity Redding. So basically, I'll be presenting for about an hour or so, and then I'm going to let her take the floor and have her present. Yes, Charity the Queen. By the way, does anyone hear white noise right now? I feel like I didn't hear it like 10 minutes ago, and now I'm hearing it, and it's driving me nuts. But if I'm the only one hearing it, I'm just going to move on.
I
Or
hear it.
you do hear it. Okay. I feel like this wasn't happening before. And hold on, let me just unplug everything first, and then we're going to give me just a second. I'm just going to mute this.
It stopped for a second. You're muted. We still can't hear you, love. Here we go. Now we can hear you.
Well, yeah, because it's connected to my. Checked. Oh my God. Okay. All right. So we've got two options. Um, live with this white noise that somehow is going on audio wise, signal pathways through my audio interface, or just yeah, I literally this retrograde eclipse is killing me. Or I can just use the Mac microphone and just like bypass all of that stuff, and we can do that, and that's fine. And honestly, I'm for that. Leave it the way it is. Does it sound okay? They're fine. This might be just the Mercury, Virgo, and me. Okay, it's fine. We're just gonna move on. All right, cool. Oh God, you lost all your shit. You lost all your shit. I'm losing my shit. It's fine. We're moving on. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Yeah, I feel like those retrograde vibes really test our patience for sure. Cool. So, yeah, today we are going to talk about synthesis, fundamentals of synthesis. So, this is actually like one of my favorite topics to talk about because yeah, I just feel like when you have a basic understanding of the way that synthesis works, you'll actually like kind of come to understand that it connects with like a lot of the same concepts that maybe you already understand. Like, I don't know, for example, like EQ, but it also gives you a basis of creating your own sounds from scratch. This is pretty fun. Question is, are you able to receive a copy of the deck or this recording? The deck, sorry, no, because it's for a school that I teach at. But you should be receiving a link to the recording later on, which you'll be able to then see these slides in the recording. So there is that. But yeah, so let's talk about some fundamental concepts that will help us understand how to make a sound from scratch a little bit better. So I'm going to actually guide you here to this fun little document that I made for a workshop that I taught, Art of Synthesis. So what is a synthesizer? So it's essentially an instrument that generates sound electronically and allows you to control the sound's timbre as well as how that sound changes over time. You can create real world instrument sounds as well as textures and specific sounds that can't be created by any real instruments. Um, so I'm going to be using this terminology like pretty frequently today, but when I talk about the concept of waveforms, it's really just referring to the idea that they're just abstract representations of sound waves. So sound essentially is just like if I clap my hands, a bunch of air molecules move around. There's like fluctuations in air pressure, right? And so this here would be considered a waveform, which is again just like a visual representation of what a sound wave would look like. And there's a couple of different ways in which we measure a waveform here. So actually, let's go to this because it's a little bit easier to see here. But there's two main things. So one is frequency, and then the other is amplitude. So frequency is basically the idea that if like it's just basically determining like how fast the waveform is moving. So you can kind of think of frequency is just like the speed of vibration, like how fast it's moving. We measure frequency in hertz. And the way that I like to think about it, which I think is the easiest way to think about it, is frequency is essentially pitch. It's just like how fast or how slow the sound wave is moving or the waveform is moving. So frequency is a measure of how many times a waveform repeats in a given amount of time. We measure frequency in hertz, Hc, which represents how many cycles per second. And then, yeah, simply put, the speed of vibration determines pitch. Frequency equals pitch. And then amplitude is basically the size of the vibration. So the size of vibration determines loudness, like how loud or how soft the sound is. We measure loudness in decibels, otherwise known as dB. So basically, amplitude is loudness, frequency is pitch. And if we wanted to see what that looked like, actually, I'm going to use this wavetable here. So I have this fun little tool called oscilloscope, and it allows us to see a little bit easier what this would look like. So if I play, let's say, a C, right? So this essentially right there here, this is the waveform. It's a visual representation of the actual sound wave. And if I, let's say, take this C down an octave, let's see what happens. So we hear a lower pitch, right? But do you see how there's like actually less of these cycles here? And think of it this like going up and down like a wave, literally like a wave. So this is like the trough of the wave, and this is the crest. Goes down, up, down, up, down, up, right? And then if I take it down another octave, we're going to get even less of these cycles here. We can actually barely hear it. And then if I go up a couple octaves here, oh, sorry, that's like super, super high, right? We get way more of those cycles. So that kind of just like illustrates the point that, again, frequency is a measure of how many times the waveform repeats in a given amount of time. The faster that waveform's moving, um, basically the higher the frequency is or the higher the pitch. And then the amplitude is loudness, right? So, and that's referring to how tall the waveform is. So if I lower this the velocity here, which basically means it's going to make it less loud. Let's lower that a couple octaves. So the waveform is about this tall right here, right? But if I take it up an octave, sorry, not up an octave, if I make it louder, the waveform basically gets taller. So yeah, it's kind of like a nice visual way to kind of like understand these concepts like frequency, okay, amplitude, frequency, pitch, amplitude, loudness, essentially. And then there's other types of waveforms that basically, I kind of think of it like this. It's like choosing the type of waveform is going to be like an artist choosing their art materials. It's going to inform generally what it's going to sound like. It's just like the base form of your sound. And different types of waveforms have different what are called timbres, so which is the characteristic of a sound. So a sine wave is a clean and mild tone that is, in theory, a singular fundamental without any harmonics, which we'll talk about in a moment. So what that means is what we're hearing right now is actually a sine wave, which sounds very pure, right? Like if I just play this here, sounds very, very, very pure. And put this in here. Yes, next. It sounds really pure, really simple, and I'm going to open up this plugin called Spectrum because it's going to allow us to basically show us more information. So, like for example, going left to right represents frequencies, which again, frequency is pitch. Up and down is amplitude or volume. So we can see this like little peak right here, right here. So, and if I hover right above it down here, it's going to give us more information. So it's basically telling us that this is C3, right? And it tells us like around like 250 hertz or whatever. And then we don't really see anything else happening. There's kind of like this stuff that's happening down here, but because up and down is referring to amplitude or volume, it's so quiet that we actually can't hear it. We only hear what's called the fundamental frequency or the actual pitch that's being played. And that's why sine waves tend to sound like really clean because they only contain the fundamental frequency. They don't have any harmonics. Whereas a triangle wave will sound like this. So let's do a triangle here. So it's got a little bit more action. It's like a little bit more lively sounding, a bit noisier. So yeah, it's a little bit noisier sounding. And then if we look at the spectrum here, so again, we still have our C3, we still have our fundamental frequency, the note that's actually being played. But then in addition to that, we see these other what are called harmonics that are present over here. So D4, 5. So all those little spikes that we see that kind of like go in a diagonal, it just means that we have different harmonics or what are called partials that are present at varying amplitudes or varying volumes. And what's really fascinating is that it's not like a chord is being played where you're playing like multiple notes at the same time. You're still playing this one note here, which is C3, but then what we're hearing is all of these other harmonics that are present. again at varying volumes, varying amplitudes, which basically gives the sound its overall what's called the timbre, which is a characteristic of the sound. So the reason why it has that timbre is because of the fact that it has certain harmonics that are present. So to recap, triangle wave is kind of like a little bit buzzier sounding, a little bit more lively sounding than, let's say, a sine wave. And then we have what's called a square wave, which sounds like this. All right, that's going to be a lot louder. And chat, can you maybe describe what this sounds like? Give it some adjectives. Any guesses to what this sounds like? Or what it reminds you of? It's okay, more abrasive, probably because it's louder and it's probably playing really loudly through Zoom right now. Video gamey. Yeah, that's a great adjective there, actually. Yeah, Nintendo Pac-Man, sure. Um, yeah, so the reason, yeah, from the 90s or 80s video game. So this is considered what's called like a square wave, and it tends to like, yeah, sound like very video gamey. And if I play in lower octaves, kind of sounds like really round and hollow sounding. So personally, I love using square waves for basses because I feel like you get this like really nice like round sound. Then if you play higher up in octaves, kind of get this like cute digital hollow sounding sound, which is kind of nice. And again, if you look at the oscilloscope here, is this what it looks like? It literally looks like a square. And if we, let me just lower this volume here so I don't blast your ears. But yeah, if we look at the shape here, it literally looks like a square. And what this means is, remember how like with the sine wave, it went like really smoothly up and down. With a square wave, it just like, again, going up or down or how tall it is referring to amplitudes. When it goes down like this, it means that the sound is off. And then when it goes up, the sound is on. So it's like down 50% of the time and down up 50% of the time. And actually, if I were to like lower this a bunch of octaves down, you can actually hear a clicking of it, like the sound going on and off, which is kind of cool. But obviously, like when we then, increase the speed or increase the frequency, we can't really hear it turning on or off, like the volume going on or off. We just like hear the timbre essentially. Yeah, if we go ahead and look at, let's see, spectrum here. Again, same concept where we have the fundamental frequency. We get a bunch of harmonics that are present at varying amplitudes, which again gives it its timbre. And then lastly, we've got saw wave, which brace yourselves. This is going to be kind of loud, so I will lower the volume here. All right, chat, can you give me some adjectives of what this sounds like? Guesses? What does this sound like? Yeah, kind of sharp sounding, brassy sounding, bright. Well, it sounds plucky because of some other things we're going to talk about later, but general timbre, I would say, yeah, sounds really bright and nasally sounding. And again, if I look at oscilloscope, we can kind of see the shape of what this looks like. That looks like a shark's tooth, actually. And then again, if we look at spectrum, we can see that it has tons and tons of harmonics. You can see that the harmonics are super, super loud. So I would say out of all of these waveforms, saw tends to be the most harmonically rich. And when we talk about filtering in a moment, we'll talk about why that's important in terms of like choosing which waveform, how you would choose your waveform, basically. Any questions so far about waveforms? And again, the reason why I'm talking about this so much is that choosing the waveform, essentially, like when you're shaping a sound, is probably one of the most important things you can do because it's like choosing your art materials and like that's going to inform, or like, I don't know, if you're a painter, it's like choosing your paints, it's going to kind of inform what it'll generally look like, right? In this sound, in this case, it'll like inform generally what it will sound like. Um, okay, cool. So that being said, so those are some like very basic types of waveforms, and that being said, there are other types. So for example, there is one called pulse width, which basically means that like technically a square wave is considered a pulse wave, but pulse wave means that you can basically change the width. Um, so like for example, with a square wave, you get this like very even where it goes up, right? And then this amplitude is basically all the way down and the amplitude goes up. So it's just like the width of this wave is basically pretty even. Pulse width just basically means we can change the width of this pulse wave. So I can make it really thin, and actually it changes the sound. It makes the sound thinner. Or I can widen the width and it'll actually like make the sound wider, but I can kind of like modulate it. We'll talk about that in a moment, what that means, but I can kind of modulate the width to kind of change the way that it sounds. And that's kind of cool. Um, and then I would say like another type of waveform that's pretty common is noise, which we're not going to find in wavetable, but basically it's just kind of what it sounds like. Sounds like noise. And go over here. But yeah, it's essentially just like often harsh, usually atonal, used to add air and dirt or dirt and fill out sounds. But it also can be used as the basis for drum sounds such as hi-hats and snares. Which brings us to the fun part. Now that we've talked about waveforms pretty thoroughly, let's talk about just the idea of like how we can shape a sound. And the type of synthesis I'm talking about primarily, by the way, right now is subtractive synthesis, which is basically the idea that you have a bunch of frequencies and then you can kind of like filter out some of those frequencies to shape the timbre of the sound. Um, and Great question. JC asked, will you be using digital synths to create your own sounds? Yes, I'm not going to be using hardware synths today just because I think it's like a little bit easier to see if I can screen share what's happening in Ableton. But I'm going to be demonstrating with some Ableton stock synths, but then also we partnered up with a company called Air. For their technically InMusic, like Moog got bought out by InMusic, so they gave us some plugins. I'm going to be demonstrating today. But so yeah, let's go ahead. The reason why I'm using Wavetable, by the way, this is an Ableton Live synth that comes with the suite version, is because I feel like it's super visual. And so I think it's a really good synth to demonstrate with, especially if you're new to synthesis, because I think it's like easier to understand certain concepts if you can see things. But basically, in any synth, and I'm demonstrating with Wavetable, but a lot of these concepts you'll actually see in different synths as well, even hardware ones. But usually the first place you would want to start is the oscillator section. So a lot of times it'll say OSC and oscillator. So remember how I was like talking about the idea that like synthesis or synths, really synthesizers, generate sounds electronically, right? So like in a hardware synth, it's just like generating electricity essentially. So the oscillator section is essentially the part of the synth that produces the fundamental sound that will then go on to be shaped by other parts of the synth by going through a signal path. Oscillation is kind of what it sounds like, actually. Oscillation itself is the generation of waveforms which sound different depending upon their shape, which we just talked about. A lot of synths have multiple oscillators and then many types of waveforms or wave shapes that you can choose from. So the ones that we just talked about are like basic waveforms, but technically there are a lot of other types of waveforms that you can also choose depending upon the synth. But yeah, and then if you have different oscillators that you can choose from, then you can layer those different waveforms together to create a layered specific sound. So for example, in Wavetable, I have two oscillators here, and then I'm going to make this actually nice and big by clicking on this arrow here, just so we can see this better. But yeah, so oscillator one, so I can choose my waveform here, but notice if I click on basics, I can also choose these different waveforms here, and they're just going to sound different, right? But yeah, if I, let's say an oscillator one, choose like saw, and then oscillator two, I can turn that on and then maybe choose like, I don't know, I'm gonna choose a like square or something like that. And it's gonna mix those two sounds together. And then if it says dB, that's referring to volume. So like, I don't know, what if I just wanted to mix those two sounds together by lowering the volume of the saw wave? I can do that. I can kind of like mix those sounds together that way. A lot of times you can also change the tuning of each synth, meaning that, I don't know, for oscillator two, where it says semitones, ST, that's referring to half steps. So if I, let's say, type 7 semitones, that's basically referring to a fifth. So I can basically tune the oscillator two a fifth up from oscillator one. It's going to sound like this. Kind of cool. It kind of sounds medieval. I can also detune this synth slightly, or so the oscillator slightly, which will maybe widen the sound. And it's like subtle, but if you have headphones on right now, you can hear the difference. If anyone has used the chorus effect, it's kind of similar to that, where it'll like literally widen the sound. Cool. So that's the concept of oscillator is you'll choose your waveform. If you're choosing, if you're using more than one oscillator, you can basically change the volumes of each oscillator, choose different waveforms for each oscillator, change the tunings and things like that. And then the next, usually for subtractive synthesis, signal pathwise, usually it'll go from the oscillator section to the filter section. So with filtering, if you've ever used EQ, it's going to be a similar concept in the sense that with filtering, you're just filtering out certain frequencies. So like if I put this over my mouth, I'm like literally filtering some of the frequencies out. So you'll notice that there's a frequency knob here. Sometimes it'll say FREQ. And so if I turn this knob, we're going to hear the sound change. And I want everyone to type in the chat how the sound is changing. Sounds like this, and then any guesses? Yeah. Someone asked a question, when would you use wavetable versus operator? That's a great question, actually. Maybe we'll answer that more a little bit later, but operator basically uses a type of synthesis called FM, which generates really interesting harmonics. So if you're wanting like a sound that has, I don't know, like a bell-like sound, or like an organ type sound, like a bass organ, it would be helpful to use FM synthesis or like operator. Smaller to larger waveform. So yeah, dampening and brightening is the right answer. So the sound basically gets brighter and darker. So that's what filtering does, is it essentially subtracts frequency. So if I set this at, let's say, 514 hertz, it's basically going to subtract or remove frequencies above 514 hertz. And then, we can click up here and change also how it's filtering out the frequency. So right now we have what's called a high pass a low pass filter cutoff or filter curve, which means it's filtering out anything above 514 hertz. If I choose the opposite, which is this, it does the opposite. It's a high pass filter, meaning it cuts anything below 514 hertz. You get a very different type of sound. Now it sounds like really thin. Again, versus low pass. Now it sounds muffled. We have band pass, which is going to filter out frequencies on either side. And then we have notch, which basically cuts out frequencies exactly at 514 hertz. And then we have this funny one called morph, which basically is going to move between those different filter modes. Which kind of looks like those funny paper things with arms that stand in front of like car washes. Cool. So that's the concept of the filter section is you can filter out frequencies, subtract frequencies, hence subtractive synthesis. But yeah, I would say it's one of the most important parts of sound creation and where a lot of the synth character lies. For example, timbre. So yeah, we talked about frequency or filter cutoff. The main control of any filter, the cutoff frequency decides where the filter will begin cutting out the sound. Yeah, it's often a low pass filter, I will say, but different synths have different filter mode options. And then we haven't talked about resonance yet, but resonance basically emphasizes or boosts the frequencies where the filter cutoff is set. In other words, it amplifies those frequencies and makes it louder. So if I raise this here, so RES stands for resonance. Do you see how this goes up? So it just basically means, so remember going up is amplitude. So going up just means that I'm making this louder at 514 hertz. Now, if I move the filter cutoff, this fun little like resonant sound because of the fact that the resonance turned up high. So wherever I'm moving the filter cutoff is where it's going to boost the amplitude essentially. Kind of get this fun whistling sound. So if you've ever heard like an acid bass, that's basically what it's doing is it's like moving the filter cutoff in the resonance. And that's pretty fun. Okay, cool. So we'll talk about that maybe in a moment. But yeah, let's talk about the concept of envelopes. So envelopes essentially, the way that I think about it is that they are a shape that shapes signals over time and determines what happens when a note is played. So envelopes can shape an aspect of a sound such as volume, pitch, waveform, shape, etc. So I feel like the easiest way to understand envelopes is what happens to volume over time. So again, AMP stands for amplitude. Amplitude is volume. So think about like how a trumpet sounds like. So usually like it takes time to blow air into the trumpet, right? And so it's going to take a moment before the volume reaches peak volume, and then it's going to fade to silence at a certain point. If you pluck a string on a violin, you're going to hear the volume peak probably pretty quickly, and then it's going to fade to silence. If you bow a string on a violin, it's going to kind of like crescendo slowly, peak in volume, and then fade out. So for example, we're going to use this envelope here to kind of demonstrate that. So ADSR, by the way, it stands for A stands for attack, D stands for decay, S stands for sustain, and R stands for release. And what that means is if we're talking about shaping volume over time, so amplitude. So if we start with the concept of A, attack, if I can either click and drag here to change the time, milliseconds, or I can drag up here to change that. But if I make this attack time longer, let's hear how this changes the sound. It changes here. So I'm going to make this even longer. how it kind of like slowly crescendos in versus a really short attack time? It actually does sound pluckier. It sounds like we hear the sound right away versus again what's happening it's just basically taking longer to reach peak volume. And this right here, by the way, this is peak volume. So it takes a longer time to reach that peak volume versus a really short attack time. It reaches peak volume basically right away. D and S. So let's talk about S first, which is sustain. So notice how it doesn't say milliseconds, it says dB because it's referring to volume. So if I lower this sustain volume, it's basically referring to when I hold my finger on the key and hold the note down. It's just like, what is the volume going to sit at as I'm holding the note? So actually, let's raise this a little bit. So right now it's at negative 23 dB. If I increase this sustain, we're going to hear a louder volume. And then if I decrease this, we're going to hear a lower volume. And it's really subtle. It's very, very quiet. Okay, so, and then D decay, it's just like how long does it take to go from peak volume to the sustain level? So if I have, let's say, a really short decay, I always hear like a plucky sound versus a longer decay. Sounds different, right? And if I play, and I can basically drag this around, by the way, to kind of adjust decay sustain at the same time. And kind of like create maybe a, or set it to a lower sustain and a shorter decay time to create kind of like a plucky sound. And then lastly, R stands for release. It's just like how long does it take for the sound to fade to silence after I release, basically after the note stops playing. So if I have like a longer release time, let's hear what that sounds like. So the note kind of just like rings out, right? Versus like if I have a really short release time, as soon as the note stops playing, we're going to basically hear the note quickly fade to silence right away. So to kind of like recap here, just shaping this amp envelope here, it's just shaping volume over time, and that's essentially going to change the way that the sound is. And so if you are trying to like emulate a real sound, you can kind of think of like, all right, what's happening when the sound is being played? Like how long does it take for the sound to get to peak volume and so on and so forth? Or if you're just like creating a sound from scratch that has like nothing to do with a real sound that exists in nature, then you can kind of play around with these settings to change the sound and create something really unique. By the way, like you can have different envelopes set to what's the word is called modulate, but you can have it modulate something else. And the idea of modulation is you can basically have one thing affect another thing, meaning that maybe with like envelope 2, I want like the pitch to go up and then to go down really fast. And I'm going to have the envelope 2 do this with the pitch. So down here, this is the modulation section in Wavetable, the matrix. So up here is basically our sources of what we can have modulate something else. On the left-hand side are the things that we want to modulate. So for example, envelope 2, I can go down here and maybe change this to like 2, which is referring to 2 semitones. And we're going to hear how it's going to move the pitch like this, basically. Actually, let's make this really obvious. I'm going to set this to 12, which is an octave, 12 semitones. And now let's make this more obvious. We're going to have the pitch slowly go up and then come down. Maybe let's move this up. And then let's do this 24 semitones, which is 2 octaves. Cool. So you can see how like this is the pitch envelope essentially now. So we're just shaping how the pitch changes over time. And we can do that now in combination with what is happening with the volume or the amplitude envelope over time. Okay, Jamie asked, why is 514 hertz a key place to filter from with high and low pass? It's not. It's just something that it's just a randomly a place that I set the filter cutoff to be set at. Okay. Yeah, cool. So that being said, that's a concept of envelopes. There's a nice pretty picture here of explaining what attack, decay, sustain, release is. And then now that we have an understanding or basic understanding of what envelopes do, we're going to talk about LFOs, which are super fun. So LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, and it's basically an oscillator that we can't hear. So unlike other types of oscillators that I was referring to that generate waveforms, right? These oscillators technically produce sound waves so low and slow we can't hear, so they're below 20 hertz. But the function of them is to modulate a signal to create effects like vibrato, tremolo, phasing, or overall to create movement and make a sound more interesting. So I kind of think of LFOs like invisible hands that turn a knob back and forth, affecting something, such as the filter cutoff, loudness, pitch, etc. So, for example, if I, let's say, move this filter cutoff back and forth right now, so we can hear the sound getting brighter and darker, right? But, it's like I don't have all the time in the world all day to be doing that. So maybe I could just have an LFO do it for me. And I'm going to do that by going over here to where it says LFO. And what I can do is I can change the rate, which is basically how fast or how slow the LFO is moving. So again, up here I have LFO 1. And if I actually click where it says frequency, it'll pop up over here. And then now I can go over here, click and drag up. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just like assigning the LFO to the filter cutoff. And now it's just basically moving back and forth for me. And I can make it slower or faster. That's kind of fun. I can also, by the way, instead of hertz, which basically allows you to freely kind of set the rate of how fast the LFO is moving, I can also click on the note value here and then change it to a specific rate that it's moving at, which is basically going to sync it with the project's BPM. So I had it set at 514, right? But I can kind of move this wherever I want. The amount is just basically how much it's modulating. So if I want it to be a little bit more subtle, I can lower this amount. I also can maybe add a delay to the LFO so it doesn't kick in right away. So I can basically go up here where it says A, which stands for attack, and go like that. Give it maybe a 1 second delay before the LFO kicks in. And maybe I can also go down here. 83 is how much I'm modulating as well. Maybe I can lower that to make it more subtle. You can kind of create this like tremolo thing that's happening. What if I assign the LFO also to the pitch? That's kind of fun. So we can affect the pitch, we can affect vibrato, tremolo, things like that, which is pretty fun. And maybe I'll have like this LFO 2 and change some of these settings here. Maybe set it a quarter rate. And also maybe change the waveform itself from a sine wave to, let's say, a square wave. And have this affect, what about, let's do, actually, this is fun. I'm going to click on the waveform here, and it's going to basically change how it's moving from a saw wave to another type of waveform. So LFO2 to oscillator 1 position. Maybe I'll also, let's see, change I'm gonna have LFO2 modulate decay time. Or maybe, oh, this is fun actually. Let's do resonance. LFO2. So I'm just showing you here that you can kind of just like have certain things mapped to other things to have it modulate and just like basically change the sound and kind of like move things and like create more movement and make the sound different and a little bit more interesting. There you go. So you can kind of hear how it's like you can hear that like whistle sound and it's doing it at a rate of quarter notes with that like square wave. So you can hear it like going on, off, which is kind of cool. That's pretty neat. All right, so um that's an LFO. And then I think one of the last things I'll talk about before I talk about some of these other plugins here is just the concept of glide. So let's make this sound a little bit more normal, not normal, but just like more basic. um, the sun is like coming in right now. Um, so one thing that we could do is, so right now is a polyphonic synth, meaning that we can technically play more than one note at a time. But I can change it to mono, meaning that I can only play one note at a time now, which is something that we want for like a bass, for example. And what's fun with that is a lot of times with synths, if you choose mono, it means that you often can then set what's called glide, which basically means that I can, if I play from one note to the next, it's going to glide up or glide down from one note to the next. So without glide, let's turn this back to poly actually. Kind of just like steps from one note to the next, but if I change this to mono and then like add some glide, I add a lot of time for glide. We're going to hear this like really exaggerated, but nice subtle glide is kind of fun. That's kind of cool. All right, so those are some basic concepts there. Now, if we want to like really just like use those concepts to like create a cool sound, let's go ahead and do that. So, I've got this Mariana Moog synth here, and it's loud. Yeah, so this is a cool Moog synth, and you know they have like a bunch of presets, but I think System Bass is just like the basic one that they have. But let's maybe apply some of these concepts here. There we go. There we close that. Okay, so we've got, let's see, dual oscillator here. So, you know, again, we can, let's say, change our wave shape. So this is set to look like square, but then this is saw. Triangle. I think there's probably, let's see here. So I would say like in a synth, like usually like choosing the wave shape is probably the most important thing. And then like changing the frequency. And when you, on a Moog, what this is referring to is dual oscillator. So what it's doing is it's like tuning another oscillator to the first oscillator. So it's kind of like what I did before, how you have two oscillators and then you can maybe tune another one like a fifth up. So this is like a similar idea. Right now, that's what I'm doing. Two oscillators tuned like a fifth apart. You got detuning here. We've got glide. Oh, we've got our filter cutoff. So this is our filter section, right? I can make it brighter or darker. Resonance. Oh, gotta be careful with that sometimes because it gets really screechy. And then we didn't really talk about envelope amount. EG stands for envelope, but it's just basically like how much you're applying the envelope. A lot of times, like lowering this envelope amount, you can kind of just like, kind of almost like make it a darker sound. But the more that I add here, we're gonna hear this like emphasizing of the red. Um, cool. And then we've got noise here, so I can maybe add some white noise here to add in. I think there's probably there's a mixer section, which allows us to basically mix in levels of oscillator 1, oscillator 2. And then the noise. Cool. So that is super fun. Cool. We've also got this DuraSynth, which is emulating a Juno synth. So for time's sake, I'm not going to create a chord from scratch. I'm just going to go into my user library and let's grab a chord here. So is this, let's just see if this should be perfect. Perfect. Okay. I just realized that the noise just went away. That's remarkable. Okay. So, no, it's still there. Just kidding. I'm actually wondering if it's like one of these plugins. Anyhow, so sidebar here. Yeah, I think it's coming from the Jura. Okay, that totally makes sense. Yeah, some of these plugins here love to emulate the idea that certain plugins just like output literally white noise. And I think that's what's happening. Anyhow, so the Juno is noisy. That is for sure. So anyhow, we are going to, let me see, this is abandoned. Okay, cool. So if you have a plugin, by the way, a lot of times they'll have like presets, which are super nice. Right? So I can choose these like different preset sounds, which basically means someone's done the job of like going through these settings here and turning knobs and adjusting faders. Super nice. But since we just had a little synthesis lesson, we can kind of head to where it says init, INIT. So anytime you see a synth plugin that says that, it means that it's basically the default setting where it's just like a really, really basic sound. So it kind of just sounds really brassy right now. So if we kind of follow the things that I just went over. So DCO stands for digitally controlled oscillator. So this is the oscillator section. So again, this is where I can basically choose my waveform. So like, let's say square wave, but maybe I want to go to PWM, which stands for pulse width modulation, which is what I talked about earlier, and maybe change the width of the square wave. Cool, that's fun. I can turn on what's called sub or sub oscillator, which is going to add some lower frequencies to the sound. If I increase the level, that's just basically going to add the volume of the sub oscillator. Maybe I want to add some noise, which we just talked about. Just gives it like a little bit of dirt. VCF stands for voltage controlled filter, which is basically going to change the timbre of the sound, right? Like filter out certain frequencies. So cutoff is the same thing as FREQ or frequency filter cutoff, and I can lower this to make the sound a little bit darker, right? Because it's cutting out the higher frequencies. By the way, this is a low pass filter. If I go over here, this is a high pass filter. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to cut out the lower frequencies. Right, it's going to make the sound thinner. Resonance, RESO. Right? Things we just talked about. Envelope. So this is where we can essentially, let's actually head over here first. This is where we can shape our maybe like amplitude envelope here. So maybe we want a little bit of a slower attack. Let's just see what happens when we adjust some of these settings here. Let's have like a longer release here. And we actually have a second envelope here, and I want to say that it's like actually going to affect the filter of envelope here. So let's actually do this. I'm going to shape this envelope. I think this is the amplitude envelope here a little bit differently. And then with this envelope, let's just shape this a little bit like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to increase this envelope amount here to hear how that changes the sound. That's really nice. Oh, I just realized. Cool. So we could shape that. And then a lot of times, oh, we have an LFO actually. So let's have LFO here. Maybe affect the pitch, which is, we can affect that in the oscillator section here. So we're actually going to sync this so that it's basically sync just means that we can kind of like sync it to a specific like note value, like an eighth note or a quarter note or something like that. That's fun. And so now if I adjust the speed, let's do like, I don't know, like 16th notes. And then, oh, here we have our delay, which means that we can set a little bit of a delay before the LFO kicks in. So maybe that'll help us create what's called like a vibrato. There you go. And then we've got chorus, which is going to widen the sound. By the way, I think it's actually already on here. I didn't realize this was on this whole time. Oh, and that is why there's our noise. So here's a Dura standalone plugin, which basically is chorus. So without this on, the sound almost is like right here, right? And then with chorus, it just like widens the sound. It kind of like detunes things a little bit slightly. And we get this like really lovely, like widened sound. Cool. And I love that I found what's causing the noise. But yeah, it's basically this noise switch here adds literally noise, which, you know, they're just trying to emulate essentially like old school hardware that inevitably just had these like little quirks of like actual noise that you would hear, which is quite funny to me. Anyhow, so the last thing that I want to share is just a really cool plugin that I think I might have demonstrated this in another workshop, but it's made by Air. It's called Ether, and I think it's really amazing. But actually, let's add this, not this one, onto the chords track here. But I just wanted to show you how like you can also use different types of effects or plugins to essentially just like further manipulate and fuck up the sound in a really cool way. But so I'm just going to use some of these presets here for Air Ether, but Yeah, we get this like really cool like Odessa like type stutter things going on. That's motion. There's echoes, which are kind of like little delays. Do like pitch, shimmer, long. Super nice and shimmery type of like reverb. So yeah, this is a really cool plugin. It's like a combination of like kind of like reverbs and delays, but like lots of like really cool very sound designy type effects in here that can like really manipulate and change the sound in a really cool way. Yeah, it's super super sick. I love it. But anyhow, that is a lot of talking. I'm glad that we resolved the noise issue, even though I took me like an hour to figure it out, which is very honestly very retrograde season vibes, and I'm here for it. But yeah, I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today. But before actually we do that, I wanted to just kind of pause for a moment and see if anyone in the chat has any questions before we move on. It's a lot of information. And honestly, I feel like the best way to learn this stuff is by doing it. So highly recommend, like, even if you have like the Ableton stock plugins, just literally going into, let's say, like instruments. And if you have Ableton, by the way, Drift is a synth that comes with every version. And then rather than clicking on the arrow and choosing these presets, I would just click on where it says Drift and drag that onto a track. This is basically the default synth. So nothing's been done to it. And then you can kind of just like go through the oscillator section, choose your waveforms, go to the filter section, set your filter cutoff, go over to where it says modulation. You have source and target. So source just is again the thing that you want to use to modulate or affect something else. So maybe we want to have the envelope one, or like, yeah, envelope one affect the low pass frequency, filter cutoff, and things like that. Let's see. So once you make the sound, that effect will be on every single note. Are you able, I'm a little bit confused by that question, but are you able to automate any part, or like, what if you liked how it sounds as you move the knobs and you want to recreate that? That's a good question. So you can either just like modulate something, meaning that like you can have something, basically like map something so that it is set to modulate something else, or you can automate that thing. So for example, if I wanted to automate the filter cutoff and just like have it go from 435 hertz to 1.63 hertz, you literally can right click on this, show automation, and then just like draw in your automation, right? And just do it that way. So there's no right way, there's no wrong way. LP told me y'all have some sort of agreement license for free Ableton. How can I get on that? I've been using my ex's. Been there, done that. Yeah, so I think that FemHouse has free licenses. To be honest, I am not involved in that kind of thing. I basically just teach the stuff. I teach the Ableton stuff, but I would recommend, I'll type the email in the chat. I would recommend emailing them. Notice me mom at thisisfemhouse.com. Great email. And just emailing them, asking them how to get in on that. I think that they do have free licenses. I'm pretty sure that whenever we have courses, like actual online courses, that especially the She is a Producer one that happens like later on in the year, they usually have like a bunch of license codes. Cool. And Charity's going to be showing her automation. So without further ado, I'm going to go and introduce her. I'm going to have her introduce herself because I just feel like the chat deserves to know all about Charity. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to highlight you now and have you take it away.
Should I share my screen first?
If you want, yeah.
Let's just get that out of the way so that then I can just
fantastic.
ADHD talk. Okay, so
I
share.
realize that you have the star background, which is amazing.
Oh yeah. I,
My
I
favorite tarot card.
is it? I love it. Yeah, because I've been trying to I'm trying to keep, lean into my feminine side. Um, Hi guys. Oh, interesting. Okay, I can't see the chat now. Let me see. How could I see both?
You want to see?
I want to see you guys in the chat just in case anybody asks something. Oh, here we go. Here's the chat. Oh, here we go. So we'll put you guys over here. Hi guys, my name's Charity Redding. Formerly known as Bubble Wrap. This is my second project that I've worked on. Been producing for about, I just was thinking about this today. I've been producing for, I think, 11 years now. Used to make Tech House, and then the Panini happened, and I had a spiritual breakdown during the pandemic, like a lot of us did. And I went back to school, music school for the third time, and I just started writing whatever came out of me. And I now am making melodic, the Venn diagram, I guess, is like melodic, organic, Afro leaning stuff. So this new project I launched it about a year ago. But yeah, I've been in and out of the music industry since the 90s. I'm usually the oldest person in the room. Started out in radio. I'm actually really glad that we had this this like this set up because, and I'm sure that Lauren, you can sort of feel me, or anybody that's been producing for a while. I get really stuck in like what I do and what I use and the tools I use. And lately I've been getting a lot of sound design feedback from like when I sent out feedback. And so this was actually really great to sort of go over some of the stuff that, because I kind of get stuck within my stuff. And as far as the Zodiac stuff, I had a record label when I had my past project, and I'm relaunching it. And I think I'm going to make all the artwork. I think I'm going to make them all tarot cards. I built it out this week, like the actual imagery. Ashley saw it. And so yeah, so I'm big spiritual girly now, where I used to be fist pumping and but yeah, so I write a lot of music, like a crap ton of music. I think I wrote 400 ideas in the last 2 or 3 years. And I really love that you were building sounds, because I honestly don't build sounds from scratch like that, because I write so much music, and I sort of have given myself like the task to write a crap ton of music, because for me, and once again, anything I say is just personal workflow and personal experience. So I like to do things like sketch out ideas really fast and then tear them apart and put them back together is basically what I like to do. So with that being said, I'm working on this track, which actually doesn't have any vocals in it. And I work with a lot of audio, whether it be loops or sounds I find, or, even like drum loops, like basically what I do, because this is probably my third or fourth time touching this project. So this is a very new-ish project, but it's one of those ones that I started it and then it's turned into, oh, this is something that I need to finish, right? Because what happens is when you write as much as I do, you very quickly realize like what has legs and what doesn't have legs. So let me just break it down for you what's in it first. Well, here, let me play you the meat and potatoes, and then I'll break down what's in it and how I've used sound designs to start shaping this like loop, because it's really easy to make a loop once you've started doing loop. Like me and the homies are about, Ashley's going to be part of it. I think this time we do a loop a day challenge several times a year. We do it for 30 days and we make an idea a day, and we have a little chat that we chat, and me and the girlies just like pop out ideas. And a lot of times those songs, the one that I did on my birthday for the very first day of April last year, I just released at the end of February. So a lot of times those end up becoming like full on songs. But tell me if you hear this. You hear it? But yeah, so that's the idea. I actually think I'm not going to do a vocal with this, and a lot of any friends in the chat know that I usually have a vocalist, but my whole intention with this track actually is to not have a vocalist. I do have this piano, which I'm part of this website called Musiversal. If anybody wants, I can send you a link for it. Basically it's like 85 session musicians, and it's like a monthly like subscription. And I had this amazing pianist come in, and like I brought him like a motif, and he literally classically trained pianist, and he like wrote it out. So that's what this piano is, and that'll be the main motif for the song, I think. So as far as sound design goes, I just realized that, oh, okay, no, okay. So I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do with this like oohs ahs. I actually might take those out and just do them myself and like, filter out. This was a really cool sitar, which I'll turn everything off so you guys can hear what it sounded like before I manipulated it, and then you guys can see after, like kind of how I start, because what I do is I'm very, very intentional about sounds. Like I find sounds, and then like I said, I just basically rip them apart and turn them into something totally different. So this was the original sound. Right. And so I looped that around. I just like, obviously I filtered it out to get like where I wanted the actual frequency to make space. I added flanger. I can never say this word right. I always say it wrong. Just to create some movement. Like she had said, you know, you just want to create some movement. And I have it at a pretty low frequency. At almost all the way up and not a lot of feedback because I really just wanted to create sort of this dreamy because you had that ether, the next plugin is like one of my secret weapons. So we had that. It just created like sort of some movement. But this is my version of ether. This is Tantra. I don't know if anybody's ever used this. It's basically a multi-effects plugin. I'm a huge preset girly, but I like to take the presets and change them. Like I'll use it once again as a basis because I do write so much and I write so fast. The other thing I really like about this one is it has a random button in the corner. So you can just literally throw this on and just mess with it. And so this is basically like a riser on it. And what it did is having this on, it turned that loop into this. And then what I'll probably go in and do is I will automate like the speed maybe or the rate of the delay. Maybe even like the glitch a little bit because that has some sort of rate. I really like to mess with stuff that has sort of those like that are sort of time-based because you can really get some really cool effects out of that. And I'm pretty sure I automated something else on here. I think it was just the auto filter. So then there's the good old auto filter. If you guys know about auto filter, it's a really great way to just like throw a filter on and get a sound where you want it. And I think I just kind of filtered it out a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, I think I just auto filter and then it was just a frequency. So this is a pretty common like thing in at this point in a track that I'll go in and do. And then a lot of times I'll use the LFO in here. I love the little LFO, the oscillator in here, because then like you can apply it and I'll probably go in and I'll automate that a little bit too, because you can really kind of warp a sound with that also. Then there's this drain, which once again, I put a phaser on it. This drone or whatever it's called. This was once again, just a loop because this was like the original idea. So is this, so that's what it sounded like. You know, I kind of liked it because I don't know if you guys remember the old Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from like the 80s. It reminded me of like, the sound reminded me of like, what Gene, what's his name? And there was like a moment where he's like standing in the factory. That's what that sound reminded me of. So that these two sounds started this whole thing. I always start off with melodic elements first because those are the hardest to sort of like get down. I always do drums last. So then I added a phaser and then I added this. This is one of my favorite plugins. This is the Energy Panner by Sound Particles. And basically it is a 3D panning plugin. So basically I wanted this sound to go around your head. So if we had 8D sound, I've been sort of like geeking out on like surround sound. I also have this same company has this this synth that's got like 8 or 9 oscillators in it. It's just super, and it's all surround. You can do like 8.9 surround Dolby Atmos sort of like sound design with it. So I've been kind of sort of playing with it a little bit, but it's just really CPU heavy. So yeah, so I threw that on there with this clock effect, which is one of my favorites that I use pretty often. I think I actually use this in the rest of the sound. This just was just like a riser that has a reverb on it. What's this? What did I put on the piano? So this piano is just a regular, you know, baby grand. I added a tiny bit of delay to it, mostly because I need to go in and I need to time the piano. In a lot of places, the MIDI is just slightly off. You know, because when you have a classical pianist right over your stuff, that's the type of MIDI that you get. So, and normally I would just pull some of this, but this piano is so just tasty that I'm probably gonna leave most of it. And that's sort of like one of the things that's a double-edged sword for me. I really like do things sort of straightforward. And I'm trying to get better at just like ripping them apart. But I believe, if I remember correctly, yeah, I sort of messed with the delay through the break a little bit just to create some movement because once again, this is a pretty new project. I'll do drums last because drum sound design is drum sound design. I don't think it's as fun as this. So I had this pluck. This was another one that I used the energy panner on. Let me make sure what else is on. Anything else? Nope. Okay. So this was just what did I use for this pluck? Oh, Diva. I'm a Diva girly, but you're gonna see later, like I got Serum 2 and I almost was trying to like figure out how to show you guys. I'm really loving Serum 2 and I think it's going to really like sort of get me out of my like sound design, using the same tools and the same tricks all the time. It's got some really powerful stuff in it. Right. Yo, those keys are so great. Like he came on and he smashed it. It's this kid from Brazil that I've been working with on that website. But so this is Diva. I'm a Diva girly. I really like Diva. Um, the only thing I'll say about Diva is I don't think doing sound design in Diva is as fun as doing sound design in Serum. I almost feel like you can do so. I like the way Diva sounds, but Serum I really, really love. Like there's just so much cool stuff you can do in Serum. And I like the interface of Serum, but I like the way Diva sounds better. So this is just like a little pluck that I have that's sort of going through the meat and potatoes of the song. Um, Once again, I have Energy Panner. And I thought I had something. Okay, maybe. And I think the preset for Energy Panner is the clock effect once again. Told you guys. I get used to the same stuff and then I just like so yeah, it's just like a regular, and then I have the frequency. I basically just did that to create some movement. And then I dry wetted the overdrive um today just to like, because I think I'm going to push that and I will more than likely just probably like tear this whole thing apart. I'll probably resample it. Is what I actually will probably do and then do something cooler with it. This is the pad. Did I do anything with the pad? What is this? Oh, and I think is it off right now? Yeah, so this pad, I added some chorus to it, widened it up. This is like a Echo Chorus reverb thing from UAD. I'm a huge UAD. Here's our our you know, this is my version of the Juno. Although I really like the one that you had. I feel like it had a few more parameters that you could sort of like play with. And that's just like the Arturia one. The bass line for this is a double bass. It is it's a Ableton stock layered with a Serum. And it's just, I don't even know what I did with this. Let's see, let's turn this off so I can show you guys. Yeah, so this is a pad bass, like a long legato bass. So, and originally I was just going to keep it like that. And then, yeah, so there's there's a little bit of modulation on there. I'm trying to see where it's at. And it was just to, Oh yeah, it's this shape shift, which I'm not sure where that is mapped to. I don't know. But I just added some modulation to it, which I'm probably going to do throughout the song. But I'll do it and just play it. I'll attach it to my launch key and then just like try to find some cool places to have that modulation in there. And then this, honestly, I think is what really changed the track for me was this Ben Bomer style bass. And it's like, and this is Serum. And I basically utility it into the break. And then where's Serum? So I have a few things automated within Serum. So it started out with just like the square oscillator. The actual sound, let's see. Right? Yeah, okay. So, right? And then what I did is, let's see if it'll show in Serum as it plays. This is what I'm saying when I say I love what you can do automation wise with Serum is I automated another oscillator on top of it to create some movement with it. And as you guys can see, like this song is pretty, it's a baby right now. And it's just like some really simple ways that when I'm working really fast, which is the reason why I write as fast as I do, or write as much as I do. It's a really great way to like, you know, uh it's a really great way to just create some movement while I'm building the track out. I think the other thing that I want to do is add some modulation to this second oscillator. So I'll probably do that. And the way I would do that is just like take this envelope and apply it to I'll probably just add it to phase. And that's what I do. A lot of times I will just break stuff so that I can fix it. I wish I was more technical the way you are, Lauren. To me, I'm just like, okay, does this sound cool? Like, I'm gonna make it like I'm gonna just try something, right? Like, don't be afraid to break it because I firmly believe that when you break a sound, then that's how really cool stuff happens out of it, you know? And then let's see. Oh, drums. So for drums, my biggest thing with drums is that first off, sidechain everything. Anything that might get in the way of the kick, obviously we all know that. That's like, 101. But I've really gotten into this like automating overdrive randomly, like saturation. Like that's like a cool thing that I do that isn't necessarily sound designy, but it creates like some really cool sort of moments. To make something just stand out. You can also do this with reverb, but for whatever reason lately I've been doing it with overdrive and I'm sure some engineer will tell me I shouldn't do it, but I love it. So and all it does is of course like gives the perceived it perceives like it's louder for a second when it really isn't. Let's see. What did I do with this? This I just threw like a drum bus on it and some reverb. I'm huge on Sends. I haven't gotten there yet with this, but like my favorite is, and once again, Spectrum Analyzer. I am really trying to make sure that my music matches other stuff that I listen to and play. This is probably one of my favorite plugins just to show people like my tools. It's like Distressor. It's this amazing like saturation plugin. It makes everything just sound really tasty. And I believe this is the chorus. Yeah, so this is a chorus. I have chorus on Ascend. So if I want to widen something, I just throw a tiny bit of chorus on it and Ascend. Yeah. Let's see. Let me find the chat because I hid it. Where's the chat at now? Where'd you guys go?
We're still here.
I know. I'm trying to find it. Oh, here we go. There we go. All right, let's see. Oh, Ben Bass, yeah. Yeah, it's I'm a huge Ben Bomer fan, and I think that was just like a tutorial. Um, yeah, so I experiment a lot, and I firmly believe that, if you watch videos of like some of the like biggest producers in the world, they'll tell you that there's a lot of happy accidents. Like, I think I saw Skrillex or somebody talking about how, that dubstep bass line that he made that was so famous was really just them like breaking stuff. So don't be afraid to break stuff while you're doing your sound design, because I find that that's really how I come up with cool stuff more than anything. Um, I'm trying to think of some like cool sound design tools that I use. Output also has something like that. Ether, it's called Movement. It's sort of the same thing as Tantra. Um, what else do I have? I feel like I have so much stuff. Um, as far as choruses go, Tall has that free chorus that is really cool. And then I randomly like Serum has this FX now. Um, yeah. Any questions?
Oh, yeah, thank you so much for that. I always enjoy watching other people's process because I feel like everyone's a bit different. And I just always think it's so fascinating to see other people's approaches. But yeah, I completely agree with you in terms of just like leaning into that idea of just like not being afraid to break things and experiment.
Yeah.
That's how you discover cool sound.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you use Wavetable because I learned sound design on Wavetable. And it's honestly probably the my favorite out of all of the Ableton stocks, but I just never use it anymore because I have all these other fancy tools that I paid for. But now I'm like, I think I'm gonna give myself like, this is another thing. I don't know if this benefits anybody in the chat, but like, sometimes I'll give myself, you can only use these, you can only use this, right? Like, we have so many tools and sounds and things at our like disposal that I find it's it's sometimes limiting what I'm allowed to use, can make me be more creative in the back end. So I think for the first week of my loop challenge this next month, I'm gonna do just all Wavetable. And I definitely start off with bass lines, like I said, like, you know. And the other thing, I didn't see you. Let me share it one more time. Hold on. Because here's another little tool that um hold on, let's do this again. Just make sure it's, because I didn't see this. Okay, and then so can you guys see my Ableton? Yeah, you guys see Ableton now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This is a really great tool that is really great for like, where do I have an auto filter? So I have an auto filter here. So Ableton also has this because I know you were talking about LFOs. So this is a really great tool. Also, if you want to, once again, manipulate audio, So let's see, the audio is under audio effects, I think now. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so there's this little tool. And you can map an LFO to anything, right? So for instance, the sound like that I made that I really love, which was like this, you know, cool little, I can map this. So like cool stuff like that can really be powerful, you know? Um, I actually really love that LFO tool. I use it quite a bit once I'm like further on into the track. Um, what else do I use for audio? Trying to think. Now that you've got me, I'm like, let's see. And then of course there's always the like, you know, the reverb. Another really cool thing that I love to use is where's it at? And this is sort of like it's not a it's not like chorus, but in lieu of chorus, sometimes I'll use the spectral blur, which basically like sort of like to me in my head, it sort of widens the sound, but adds like all these really cool artifacts. And then I'll like resample that and pad that out and then add an auto filter with like an LFO and create like, you know, like a cool sort of pad out of it, which I actually probably will do with this because that's one of my favorite little tricks to do. Yeah, and then let's see, let's go back to Serum and see. The thing I really like about Serum 2, which here, I'm going to load an instance of Serum 2 just to show you guys. Have you played with it yet, Lauren?
I'm so embarrassed to say I haven't upgraded yet just because I've been like knee deep into like
Of
Gurtnag
course.
the past week or so. When did it came out last week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I am excited that I can just upgrade and I can't wait to check it out. I've heard some really great things about it.
That was great. What I really like is it has like all these macros. So you can literally like you can macro anything, and honestly like there's just like for instance, let me just find a preset to show you guys. And a lot of them already come with like, oh, here we go, ring modulated. So see, they already have these macros that are like sort of mapped in a lot of them, and you can literally just like look, it has the resonance, it has the filter. I think especially for the girlies in the chat, like you're learning synthesis. So and it's a never ending hole, right? Like it's like a never ending rabbit hole. And I'm always learning something new, and I don't think anybody will ever know all the things, right? And so I really like this because it's once again, because I like things to be as quick and easy as possible. Maybe it's my ADHD. But it's like you can like look, you can even like map the noise, right? So like let me do this just so that I can, right? Oh wait, hold on. Let's do that. Right? So we got the sound, but then you can like it's all pretty much, it's almost like training wheels, if you will, right? So everything's already mapped for you with the macros, which I really like that a lot actually, because it's really easy to go in and just like start sketching out ideas. And then once again, once I'm like, a month or 3 or 4 weeks into the project, then I'll get a little more nerdy and into the weeds, if you will. So, but this thing's so powerful. I'm actually really excited to like dive deeper into this because it's, yeah,
It actually looks a lot nicer, I will say.
it is. Yeah, it looks so
My
much
the
nicer.
last arm was like when I first started using it, I was like, this is killing me just from like a design perspective. It just looks like not fun to play with.
It's not, I'm not a huge fan of Serum 1, like I said, but I think Serum 2 is basically gonna, and then, it's like, yeah, I'm really excited about getting into this one. So if you guys have Serum and you can upgrade, I definitely would, because this is a really great way, I think, to teach yourself what certain parameters of sound design sound like, right? Because at the end of the day, your ears are going to be like your best, indicator of what you're doing within a VST. So, you know, if you want to know what opening the filter cutoff sounds like, play with the filter cutoff, you know what I mean? And then eventually and the other thing that I find really powerful for sound design that was told to me is um, uh, yeah, you can map those to, physical knobs. So let's see if I can pull up Serum again while I have you guys on because I think I just got this new Novation launch key and I'm pretty sure things automatically, no, but see what you do is, let me turn off this. So I would just MIDI map the filter envelope to this. Yeah, see? And then it just automatically. Yeah, I'm really excited. Novation just sent me this Launch Key 49 and it's absolutely amazing. I'm obsessed. So yeah, they're super powerful. Some Ableton parameters are already pre-mapped within it. But like I just showed you, like you can just MIDI map, hit MIDI, hit the thing within the VST. Like for this verb and delay, I would just hit another knob and then that's not what I wanted to do. And then now that verb, which is this one right here, now that one's mapped. So that one's, so yeah, if you don't know how to MIDI map, that's how you MIDI map. But yeah, so, and I do firmly believe that like, it's not rocket science at the end of the day. I really love what you, okay. I really love that you did like a simple synthesis, introduction at the beginning of this, because those things are just super finite parameters that help you figure out like exactly what sound is doing, and if you look at it like a wave in the ocean, like I always love that metaphor for it.
Yeah. And I think it's like, yeah, I wanted to mention that like a lot of the concepts I was talking about are very technical, but at the
Mhm.
same time, like honestly, like I kind of like think it's like anything that you learn about production. I think that the more you know, the more it can kind of guide you to like doing certain things. But at the same time, it's just kind of like what you were saying, like some engineer bros might like yell at me for doing this thing, but it's like if it sounds cool, it sounds cool. And honestly, that's the whole point. And since you actually mentioned Skrillex, there's something that you mentioned at one point that it was like, if the vibe is there, that's all that matters. And I
Mhm.
strongly believe that because the average
Yep.
listener, that's all they care about is the vibe. And honestly, even if you're not the average listener, all that you care about is probably also the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, like being able to build sounds from scratch is really fucking powerful. Excuse my language. Like it's super powerful. It's a total like game changer in a lot of ways. But also like, like there's so many different ways to use sound design, I think. And I think that we have so many tools, like my ADHD gets very like in the weeds, and yeah, it's and I think I'm guessing that a lot of people in the chat are pretty new. I also think that, you know, starting out, don't overthink it. just do what sounds cool to you. You know what I mean? And I think that I love what you guys are doing, by the way. This is so dang cool. I wish I had this 10 years ago, because I made like so many mistakes dealing with
Yeah.
dudes in the industry, like
Honestly,
um
always
uh
looking for a mentor because I feel like I'm a mentor to so many people, but I never
mhm,
had a mentor. And I
yep.
feel like that's so powerful. Just like
Hmm.
believing in you or just someone that can share knowledge that doesn't make you feel stupid.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That isn't like, oh, you gotta, you got, like, which I love this. I love how just like cool and chill, like having a bunch of girlies together to like, nerd out about synthesis. Um,
Totally.
and this stuff is like, like I said, I've been doing this for a decade, and you know, there's concepts all like have dialed in, and then it's like you constantly need to be learning. So I actually relearned, if you will, a bunch of stuff today because it's a lot of stuff I forget about in the day-to-day minutia of making music.
Totally. I mean, I relearn stuff all the time actually when I'm teaching, if I'm going to be honest with
Yeah.
yeah. Do we have any questions from the chat? There's a lot of really cool information that was shared today. A lot of information. Um, don't hold back. Any questions? Um, information and inspiration. But yeah, thank you for sharing your knowledge and for sharing your time. And yeah, it's so cool to meet you also finally.
I know.
I was in a all right, I guess I still am in a WhatsApp group with Charity. So it's cool to put like a face and energy to like a name that's like
Yeah.
which is pretty neat. Yeah, because I think the first time I think I came across you was in that
Mhm.
group, and I heard some of your tracks. I was like, "Well, she's super talented."
Thanks.
But yeah, is there question in the chat? Is there a community to share tracks for feedback, etc.? Ooh, that's a really good question. So maybe you can share some stuff, Charity, but there is a FemHouse Discord, which I'm going to share in the chat that you can join, which have like a bazillion channels. And to be honest, there's no community organizer or moderator, so it's a little chaotic. But I
I'll put my IG in the chat. I'm in so many like girl and music WhatsApp groups also. So, and if anybody wants to join the Loop a Day challenge, it's going to start next week after everyone is recovered from Miami Music Week. Like,
oh god, oh there it is. Okay, I was like, there's so many Discord fucking
hmm
link thingies. Okay, so this is the FemHouse one. But yeah, follow Charity. Mine is Mini Bear Beats. Um, but yeah, Discord, we have I think there's a channel specifically for sharing feedback, so feel free to hop in there. But yeah, as far as like upcoming stuff, FemHouse has I'm assuming if you're in here, you're not at Miami Music Week, so but there's I think some FemHouse events there. I guess I'll just share this guy here, but there's some workshops coming up. We have creating a live set in Ableton Live coming up next month, a vocals workflow the following month, and then we've got a few like DJing workshops, and then I'm sure like at some point we'll have some online courses for you. But yeah, other than that, thank you for all of your thoughtful questions in the chat and for your amazing energy. And thank you, Charity, for giving us your time and knowledge. And
thanks for having me.
yeah, and I'm gonna re-download WhatsApp so that I can hop in that 30-day challenge again. Yay! But yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. See y'all soon.